me. Do you mind if I join you? Are you sure you don't mind? You're absolutely sure I won't be disturbing you?
I'll try to make this brief, as I know that many of you have important places to go.
Hello and welcome to the Mental Suppository. I'm Bret Herholtz.
I'm Andrew Shanley.
And our guest tonight is performer, writer, artist, and photographer, Katie Willert. Thank
Hi.
You. Hello, thank you for appearing.
Nice to meet you,
thanks
Katie.
for having me, guys. Nice to meet you too, Andrew.
And listeners might want to know that Katie and I worked together for a little while on crack.com. I was her Inner Thoughts. Well, I provided the illustrations for her Inner Thoughts.
Yeah, for After Hours, he captured the dark depths of my soul.
And they are very dark, and they are very deep too.
So deep, so deep.
So very deep,
Well,
deeper than this voice.
What's interesting about that whole thing is that, way back when, if, you wanted to, sort of get into something like that, you'd just be like, Mom, Dad, I'm going to move out to California and go to college out there and maybe get a job at Filmation and probably end up, washing tables at Bob's Big Boy for a while. But now it's just with the internet, it's just, in the last like 10 or 20 years, it's just made, doing stuff like this so interesting where I could, be out on the East Coast and somebody on the West Coast suddenly drops me an email saying, we're starting the show for crack.com After Hours, and we'd like you to supply the artwork for it, and we will pay you for it. Which, all of it, I was kind of waiting for that, like, sort of like the spam mail where you find out you've got an inheritance, but, it's not really.
Yeah, that's the Prince, the Prince scam, right? Yeah.
But I mean, it was like I said, it was just a great experience because it was one of those things where it's like, it was just right out of the blue. And it's like, and I think they told me, it's like, she saw your artwork and she wanted you to, to supply the animation for it. It's like, oh, wow. And I keep forgetting, people can go on the internet, they can see your work and, it's not like, back then when you'd have to send out a portfolio to a studio and they'd have to, send you a letter back. Or in this case, it was one of these things. Cracked magazine was something. It was like when they said Cracked, I remembered as a kid, a friend of mine had Cracked magazine, even though my dad kind of brought me up reading Mad. So that was the one I remember.
Yeah, I mean, that was always, it was the competition between the two. People would always be like, yeah, like the magazine? And I'm like, I mean, yeah, at one point it was.
It was like the Coke versus Pepsi Cola wars of the comic, who's
of the
funnier.
Humor magazines, yeah.
But I'll have to say, when crack.com started out, they kind of really did a really good job at like kind of pulling themselves away from the old Crack magazine image, where they sort of, were creating new content and doing stuff that was in a very different direction than what Crack magazine did.
Yeah, I mean, Jack O'Brien is, a big part of that, of taking because he had worked on the magazine, I think, briefly, and then kind of was put in charge of rebranding this as a site. And, it was like the listicles. That was, kind of Cracked, not invention, but like that was, I think, elevated that concept of like the 10 most blank, examples, whatever. And like, people really liked that. I think that, there's a lot of information on the internet, and it's nice to have well-researched information that is also, funny.
I think one of the favorite things I did for the show was doing the image for the cereal mascots, where I had the kid hitched up to the electrodes to the dish of candy. I really kind of enjoyed, and I actually based the image of the kid on the original mascot for Crack magazine. I actually tried to make it look like him.
Oh,
so
I don't think I ever realized that.
It was kind of put in a little bit sneakily, because I didn't put him in like the janitor uniform. I tried to make him look like like a kid with like the long striped shirt. But that was actually one of the images I really enjoyed doing. The other one was which ended up being the very first episode, the Back to the Future episode, because I thought you were hysterical in that one, especially talking about Marty's mother. The whole thing about her being really attracted to danger.
Yeah, dangerous slut, I believe was
Yes.
the term that I utilized.
I might have dated somebody like that who was of that nature.
I think
Yeah.
we all dated somebody
We all
like
have,
that.
yeah.
But actually, I think because I ended up doing a Marty's parents in S&M
Yep,
for that one, and I just because they said
that I do remember.
because I think the description was like Marty's parents S&M, Marty looking horrified. It's like, okay, where do I go with that?
Yeah, you got all the
Yeah.
space in the world to
Oh,
come
yeah.
up with a really disturbing image.
Sounds like an anime concept. But you know, I mean, you worked in the inner of this thing. Can you describe kind of like what your position was and the things that you did while you were doing
Yeah,
it?
I was a performer and a writer, performer primarily. You know, I'd started doing sketch comedy in college with Michael Swaim. We went to school together in Abe
You guys work
Epperson,
really
and
well together. I just want to say.
thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that comes from, you know, I started working with them when I was 19.
Oh wow.
You know, and you know, we did sketches together for YouTube, and then they kind of moved over to Cracked after
Right.
they had graduated, and they asked me, similar to you, Brett. I got an email. I was like 2 months out of moving from San Diego to finishing college, moving from San Diego to LA, and I got an email being like, hey, we're developing this show. It's Pop Culture Roundtable for people. And we want you to be, you know, Michael Swaim floated your name. It was an email from Dan O'Brien.
Oh yes.
And he was like, yeah, Michael floated your name. Would you be interested? And I said, yes. And so, you know, I moved out there, and I think we shot the first episode within like 6 or 9 months of me moving there. And it was
Oh wow.
7 years of a web show.
Yes.
But yeah, so I performed primarily, and then I wrote 2 episodes of After Hours, which, you know, we're all in the writer's room post, like, you know, one person would write the first draft, and then we'd all do a read through, and we'd figure out, you know, we'd pitch different ideas. And unless someone came in with like I want to write this episode, we would all kind of sit around and throw around ideas for episode topics, and then one person would go away and write it and come back, and we'd do a read through, and then we'd do an animation pass where we'd talk about where there would be funny, you know, moments to have animations or like jokes in animations. And that's what I liked, is that every episode was pretty stacked with, there was comedy from the writing, comedy from performance, and comedy from the visual. You know, you had all 3 of those, you know, in an episode, which I thought made it very fun, you know, very funny and very smart. But yeah, that was pretty much what I had done.
Comedy can be hard too. I mean, one of the biggest challenges obviously is trying to keep it fresh and original, and also dealing with, like, you know, what does the audience find that's funny, and how do you create the funny images that people are going to really gravitate towards, and to kind of build that up. So I'm sure that presented a whole lot of challenges while you're doing a web show, because obviously the web is a different audience than, say, like television or film or something like that.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the comedy, especially with After Hours, came from the specificity, right? Like each episode was like a nerd of that topic, breakdown of that topic, dissection of that topic, you know? And so, you know, for me, I wrote the 2 episodes I wrote. The first one was the Why All the Friends from Friends Are Terrible Friends. And that's because I am an encyclopedic, you know, book of Friends knowledge. And I knew that I could get super specific, and it would be, you know, anyone who was a Friends fan or hated Friends would be able to watch the episode and like really think it was funny. And then the other one I wrote was like movies and TV that are surprisingly progressive, you know, so it was like a feminist bent on some like unlikely media. And the argument that ended up winning was Super Troopers, which because, you know, like for me, I watched Super Troopers and I went, this is one of the best, like, not feminist movies, because it's you know, it's dudes, but every woman in that movie is rad, multifaceted, interesting, smart, not a wet blanket, has agency and ownership, you know, like you know, so it's just like getting to write stuff like that
Right.
where you can get really into
Yeah.
the nitty gritty of something that isn't necessarily, you wouldn't think would be the thing, you know?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we're dealing with a transition in the way that movies and TV shows are being made today, and to see stuff like that back then was sort of revolutionary in the concept of the way that it was all presented. You know, I would even say like 5 years ago, the way TV and mainstream movies and that sort of thing had a certain it's different now. It's totally different. How would you say that you know, your comedy writing and all that stuff changed over time? Has it really kind of affected, has this stuff that's been going on lately in media culture kind of been changing the way that you write your stuff?
You know, it's interesting. I've never been a topical sketch writer. That was never my thing. Like, and I see great value in it, but it was just never something that I was like, let's write an absurd blackout sketch. Like literally it's one joke. We don't heighten. We just do the one joke and then we get out of there. You know, like something that I've always just been really like goofy and joyful is the stuff that I like writing. And things that are like so weirdly, and you know, I talked about this before with After Hours, but it's like things that are so weirdly specific that maybe only 2 people will get the joke, but those people will think it's the funniest joke in the world. And, you know, it doesn't make for like super accessible, you know, like wide audience type of work. But like, I think about how one of my favorite sketches that I've ever written is called 77 Exercises. And it's an infomercial for a workout video inspired by the Talking Heads. And it's a beat for beat, you know, workout DVD. This guy, Ryan Stanger, who was a performer at the UCB, an actor, ripped guy, like, and he loves the Talking Heads, so it was great because he understood the jokes and he had the delivery on point, and like it was just a bunch of really dumb puns and like, you know, it had clips of Stop Making Sense in it, and like, you know, you're going to be doing a lot of running because really all they do in that concert film is just they jog around the stage, you know, and what I love is that Funny or Die shared it this was years ago, but like all of these Talking Heads like fan groups on Facebook and like found the sketch and posted it, and all the comments on it are so funny because it's like, I don't know who wrote this, but this is hilarious because it was like, it's such a specific, the jokes in it are so specific, but if you're a fan, you're like, oh my God, this is the funniest thing I've ever seen. And like, Ryan said something, he was like, a lot of sketches are like Honda minivans, right? They're like, you know, they're great, they're funny, they reach a wide audience, but you know, the people who love Porsches love Porsches. People who love Miatas love Miatas, you know, and he's like, this is like a Miata, you know.
I'm a Camaro man myself, but you know.
Yeah.
Well,
I just got a Corolla, so you know.
I have a Yaris, so
I inherited Camaro, so
I had a Yaris for a very long time.
It's a great car.
Two-door hatchback, no power windows, no power locks, no hubcaps left by the end. The serpentine belt was loose no matter what I did, so it would squeal whenever I turned the car on. But I love that car.
Yeah. Oh, I think they're great cars. But you mentioned something, you know, just having a joke that just strikes a particular audience. That's something that's the type of humor I've always liked too. It was always like, you know, groups like Monty Python's Flying Circus or comedian Spike Milligan would do stuff that, you know, maybe not everybody would get the joke, but you know, it's like one of those things you would get a certain thing, like saying like Mrs. Somebody who said, you know, my husband fell out the window while, you know, being run over by a cement mixer. So, you know, that, you know, it's like always that sort of humor has always been kind of like the thing that kind of made me laugh. It's just like something like they did the whole thing on Python with Slim Pants Theater, where it's like one of these things where it's like they're doing all these great plays in these like trimline jeans that supposedly you lose weight as you're doing like these acts, and it's like stuff not everybody would get, but you know while doing plays, and it's like subtle. It's subtle. And of course, it's, you know, got Graham Chapman doing like, and they're all supposed to be Australian too, so it's like, you know, Graham Chapman in drag, so you know, doing the voice like, oh, terrific.
Yeah, I also really like putting music in my sketches, which you can't really do with like video. But when I would do live sketch at the IO, you can believe that pretty much every show there was at least one sketch to music, and it was probably mine. And I had one sketch that was literally, it was just Jim Croce coming into his producer's, like the record company owner's office, and the record company owner having to sit him down and be like, Jim, every song you write is the exact same song. Like you gotta venture out, because it's like Bad Leroy Brown, Don't Mess Around with Jim. It's like always like the baddest man in the town, and then another bad man comes, and then they have a fight, and then the new bad man is the bad man of the town, And no one laughed except for one person in the back. And the person in the back who was laughing was like losing their mind. And I can't remember who it was, but I saw him afterwards because he was on another sketch team at the IO, and he was like, "Did you write the Jim Croce sketch?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "I mean, that was like my favorite sketch of the whole night." And I was like, "I win. It's just one person.
That's great.
That's all I need."
Well, that's sometimes like you get those like where you got the one person that really appreciates it, and yeah, maybe you didn't get like the big huge like attention, but obviously you got like the big laugh from this one guy who appreciates it. And even that subtleness and even that like specific kind of joke and humor is something that people can appreciate.
I feel like part of it is just like feeling seen.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what I really like. I think if you pull it back outside of comedy, is just like this is one specific thing that I noticed. Did anyone else notice this? Does anyone else feel this way? And so then when you get the response of like recognition, of laughter, of whatever, you're like, I'm not the only one. Or
funny.
maybe that person feels like, oh my God, like, yes, I've thought about that before. Like I thought about how all of Jim Croce's songs have the exact same lyrics, with the exception of like Tomorrow's Gonna Be a Brighter Day. I think
or Time in a Bottle.
Yeah, or Time in a Bottle. Yeah, it's either like super sad.
I guess I haven't listened to enough Jim Croce to understand that, but when you said it, it's like, oh my God, you're right.
Yeah, a lot of his songs have this exact same structure.
And Don't Mess with Jim. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it's kind of like AC/DC. They're all the same chords, It's E, G, A, and D, and sometimes C. But
yeah, that moment at the beginning where you're trying to find out if it's TNT or Dirty Deeds. Like you can't. You're like, which song is this? I don't know.
Well, the only one you really kind of know is Hell's Bells. It's like, but even that one, it's like, oh, is this Metallica's For Whom the Bell Tolls? No, it's AC/DC's for Hell's Bells.
Yeah, what's the other one? It's like Green River and what's the song from? Oh, and Long Cool Woman by the Hollies.
Oh gosh.
Green River by CCR. You can't like those when they start playing. I'm like, is this the one I like or the one I don't like?
Well, I never knew it was by the Hollies. I always thought it was CCR for the longest time. It's like, holy shit, it's the Hollies.
It's kind of like Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. They're all their songs. Kind of fits together like a puzzle.
Yep.
I remember hearing a sketch comedy bit from a radio show a while ago where they were talking about like 80s rock and roll bands. And so they had like the members of the bands the member of the band who was on tour, and they're all messed up. And they're like, dude, what band are we? I don't know. It says on the thing here, we're for Firehouse. Wait a minute. I thought we were Rat. No, we're this band, we're that band. Like they're just completely like messed up as to what band they really are. So, but
those bands are kind of interchangeable.
They all kind of blend together.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like the pop stars of today. They've all kind of like they're all on American Idols. They're famous for like 15 minutes, and then everybody's like, okay, It's like Billie Eilish. I appreciate her music, but my God, it sounds the same. It all sounds the same to me.
Do you know what's funny? At the very beginning of quarantine, I made the mistake. Somehow I fell down this rabbit hole on YouTube. And I found myself watching a video of the Arizona State University a cappella group. I think they're called like the Treble Devils or something, like totally delightful. and they did a medley of Billie Eilish songs in a stairwell. So this is this like a cappella choir group. And I was just, and it was the beginning of quarantine, you know, I think the moment when we all realized it was going to be longer than 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You know, and I just was like weeping by myself in my apartment, listening to these like 19-year-olds singing When the Party's Over, you know.
Oh, God.
I myself am still in my bunker, you know.
Yeah.
It's
actually,
been interesting.
But actually, since quarantine, you've been kind of sort of doing what a lot of people have done, you know, finding, you know, new talents and, you know, teaching yourself new things, and you kind of reinvented yourself with like art and photography. You want to talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've always really liked making things with my hands. Like when I
Yeah.
was a kid, I used to get up super early and I would go turn on Mr. Wizard, and I'd set up the
Oh.
TV tray and the couch, and I'd make these like structures out of plastic straws and tape, like these buildings and this, you know, and if I had like a big box, oh, you bet I would be like with markers in
Oh,
that
yeah.
big box and making
Yep.
stuff out of that big box, you know, and I fell away from that. I think there's like a point in childhood, and I don't know, Brett, if you can like relate to this, but where it's like there's the kids who are like good at art,
Yeah.
you know, like they have the skills, and then the ones who like doing art but maybe aren't necessarily like technically really good, and you kind of, as a kid, you just go like, well, I'm not good at it, so I'll do another thing.
I think what also doesn't help with a lot of the kids who are, you know, have a good technique at it, but aren't necessarily, what's the word, you know, have it. I don't want to say a talent at it, because I think everybody has it, but, you know, I think they're also deterred from it as well, you know, by other kids. You know, you end up hearing it's like, yeah, that's not very good, you know, or even some adults too. And you just think to yourself,
Right.
I think that could be very discouraging too. So you just think it's like, well, you know.
Well, speaking as a fellow artist myself, being a photographer, you know, so I've been doing photography for a while. I've actually done television film production for the last 25 years. You know, it's especially today with the way that it is now. There's a lot of people out there that want to do photography, and obviously, technically, the technology has gotten to the point where it's a lot cheaper today to do photography. I know for a fact, like when I started doing television film production, like if you wanted to be a serious videographer, the best camera you could buy was a Beta camera, and that thing was like 50 grand.
Oh,
Now
no, Beta.
every phone has like 4K video on it, and you know, you get that free at Verizon or wherever, you know.
Right, yeah, you pay a lease on that phone, and you have a
But
Well,
everybody
speaking of
has one.
Well, speaking of technology, you guys see that crazy like transformable Optimus Prime Kevin Smith was showing on YouTube?
I haven't seen that.
They said it has more technology in it than what sent us to the moon in 1969 in that one toy. And all I could think is like, that's incredible. 'Cause just when you said you mentioned the Beta, when you mentioned the Beta camera and just like something of that nature, I'm just thinking to myself, there's now a toy with like Optimus Prime's voice where you can tell him to transform, and it will transform in front of you with more technology that sent us to the moon in 1969, and it just blows my mind.
I mean, this watch here probably has more technology than the entire, like Mission Control had in 1969.
Well,
like,
you know, all the computers on those spacecraft had their programs were all sewn by grandmas. Have you heard of this?
Oh,
the grommets.
Yep.
Yeah, they'd sew the grommets in to, to do the binary programming, and so it's a bunch of quilting grandmas like, creating the programs that sent us to, the moon.
That's it's an impressive.
Oh, this will be a nice little spacecraft.
And I like, for example, like I think that like when I was doing like video editing, I was originally doing it on tape, and now we have the ability to do stuff digitally with just a computer and a laptop. It's just amazing. I think that one of the other things too is like how this is obviously going to change the way people like consume media, we're seeing a lot more streaming. We're seeing a lot more YouTubers and TikTok and that sort of thing. What do you think your next venture might be as you continue in this kind of new age? Are you going to like explore some of those venues for production? Is that something you'd be interested in doing?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm a producer is my main occupation right now, and I was producing an entertainment news show for E.
I was going to ask
Quibi,
you. I was
right?
going to ask you about that. Were you doing presenting? As you were doing
Yeah.
presenting as
No,
well?
no, I was just producing,
Oh,
writing
okay,
and producing
okay.
the show.
I would have gotten
Yeah.
it wrong.
Yeah, so it was like this new platform, and going
Yeah.
into it, I was like, having grown up in, the digital space, all of our
Yep.
sketch, that we did prior to Cracks was on YouTube. I did all content online prior to me starting producing. I started in live television, red carpets and stuff for E, and then after that moved on to this entertainment news show. So I was like well aware when I got the gig. They were like, yeah, it's a year contract, and then we'll find out if we get renewed for season 2, a couple months before the year, and then we can extend the contract. And I knew even then, I was like, I'm on borrowed time, right?
Yeah.
Like the fact that that this is a thing, I'm like, I just never assumed it was going to last more than a year, right?
Yeah.
And that's not, has nothing to do with the like platform in and of itself. It was just like, I know that it's so fickle, right? Like what the next platform is, the new
Right.
next new thing is, and then the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And this platform, which was geared towards, people getting quick bites of entertainment on their bus rides, on their train rides, in between lunches, all that.
Right.
Suddenly everybody's at home and they didn't pivot fast enough,
Yeah.
And, I was employed for until Halloween until last Halloween, which, I'm incredibly grateful to have been employed during the pandemic. But it's kind of like, and then recently I just got off producing for a pilot presentation for network television. And like, I'm very much just, I'm going to show up, I'm going to have fun. And then if it leads to something, it leads to something,
That's the best
I've been,
attitude to have.
Absolutely.
because I've been in, in LA now for 11 years.
Yeah.
It'll be 12 in December. And, it's never been consistent, ever. And I think, like, just kind of being open to saying yes to whatever sounds fun has been kind of, I think, the thing that's worked for me. And so, like, for things like, I love YouTube. I consume YouTube, I really like TikTok. And it was so funny because I had such a curmudgeon-y old bitch like point of view about TikTok for so long. But then I've really come to understand how, algorithms scare the crap out of me, but how beautiful that TikTok algorithm is, because you niche down almost immediately. If you start on your For You page and you start interacting with the things that you like, so quickly you get introduced to just like waves of just really fun, interesting things that you are actually interested in, And so I, as someone who's an artist,
Right.
and as someone who's like pretty comfortably public facing, like I like talking to people, I like interacting with people, I do like performing, finding a way to like do art on TikTok is like kind of a goal, because I love watching people's processes.
Oh, yeah.
Artist process videos on TikTok, they're like fun, they're beautiful, they're interesting. You get to see people's like process. There's fun music, there's fun edits. I love like on TikTok, like messy, non-planning artists who are just like, I decided to make a thing. Here's the thing. I did this. I did that. Bloop, bloop, bloop. It's done. And then you're like, that's great. Like, I like just knowing like all the things that are possible if you
And
just
the
like have an
enthusiasm, I get.
idea.
Well, I think one of the big things obviously is like when you get into that kind of mode, you have to kind of unlearn all that TV production stuff. Like, oh, I have to have this camera, I have to have the tripod, I have to have the lighting, so I have to do this, I have to do it edited this way. Now we have a whole lot of spontaneity in the creation process that hasn't been there for a while. And I think that's a real fresh look at how they're doing that. So.
And isn't there a guy that's actually going to be producing his movie on an iPhone at some point?
Oh yeah,
So,
there have been people shooting on. I think Tangerine, that indie film from a few years ago. I think that was shot on an iPhone. No, you know, it's interesting. It's the democratization of these processes.
Yeah.
You know, like when Vine came out, you notice like a lot of the most popular people on Vine were like young people of color who like just blew the fuck up because suddenly they had a medium. There were so many different kinds of people making content, and it was all viewable all the time. You know, like there weren't gatekeepers. And that's like the thing with YouTube. It's like you can connect so easily with other people, like we were talking about before, like people who, you know, find the same things interesting that you do. And like in a snap, you can be connected with all these people. And like, you know, it was a conversation I'd had, I think on a podcast a couple years ago about how this woman was like a social media manager. One of the hosts was a social media manager for her job. And she was like, all the videos that had a budget that I made had terrible engagement. And all the videos that were just kind of like last minute thrown together had the best engagement. And as somebody who like came up in YouTube when like every sketch, the goal was to make it look like a movie, like to make it look so high quality and have the budget, because that was what people wanted. People wanted like that high quality, like visual quality, that then it reached a point where people were like, I don't care. I have an imagination. Like one of my favorite, he used to be on Vine. His name is Demetrius Harmon. His handle is Meech on Mars. And he does these videos where he plays all these different characters, but like the thing that will be different is he'll like have a laptop on his head or like wear a different sweater, you know, but it's like just to delineate the different people in the thing. And some of the funniest things I've ever watched are that.
Yeah.
And it's like, sometimes you don't need all this stuff,
No.
you know, to get the message across.
I was watching a video of I forget who it was, but she's basically talking to herself like before the pandemic began, like January 2020, and then like it's April of 2021, and it's just like the different perspectives of herself like back then and everything else like that. And it's just that, like I said, it's the spontaneity of doing something so creative. And even with Vine, like a lot of the Vines that they did back then, they're still pretty popular, and you still can see them on YouTube, even though the platform itself is gone. The content still lives on, and you know, that's kind of like really kind of resonates to the quality of the content itself.
Well, that's the funny thing is that like I also find I watch a lot of like Vine compilations on YouTube,
Mm-hmm.
and it those in and of itself are like another layer of art to me, because you get to know a person by which Vines they've like put into a compilation, like Vines that butter my toast or whatever, you know, like it's always like that. And you watch it and then you find stuff you've never seen before, you know, like, and there was just so much content that nobody could have seen all of it. So it's only through these like curated little like, you know, compilation videos that you get to see stuff you might have never seen.
And people collect it and kind of like put it together and they put it on YouTube, and that gets viewed, you know.
Sort of like the old G.I. Joe PSAs that people revoiced from like the early 2000s that are still recycling, and I still laugh at.
That was the beginning of my like comedy on the internet, like pre-YouTube, E-Bombs World, you know, like all the sites.
Oh my gosh.
Watch these random videos. I mean, and I like, that was my high school. Was, you know, like just watching all of I'm a computer, stop all the downloads. I think I still say that.
Honestly, when I first heard the guy yelling pork chop sandwiches, I nearly wet myself.
Sandwiches.
Just yelling, thinking, oh shit, get the fuck out of here.
Get the fuck out.
We're all dead.
I'm like, when the guy like is running down the hill and then slips on the ice. Like
Yeah.
it's
Get the
so
hell
dumb.
off my ice. And then at
It's
the end,
such a part of like my
oh,
comedy,
at
my
the
comedy
end.
DNA.
Yeah.
Do you
You know,
think that,
it's
however, and this is something that kind of like goes to the actual issue of comedy on the internet. Do you think that there are some people that get creative and they come up with one concept and they just continue to repeat that idea, trying to get that joke over and over again? Do you see a lot of people doing that and they kind of burn themselves out and they don't have any other content to do that? I mean, I would probably think that would be one of the greatest challenges of online content, mainly because of the short attention span of a lot of people today.
Yeah, I think actually to be honest, I feel like having to kind of continually post for creators, having to stay because like of the algorithm, because of Instagram, because of how these things work, you have to be consistent in order to like for the algorithm to put your stuff in front of people. And I think that forcing yourself to make stuff all the time makes you less precious and makes you more in tune with like making something that is good, what, or not good like by like an exterior standard, but make something that is like a true distillation of an idea. Because I think having this accessibility to all of these like platforms and doing something every day, even if it's not the best thing, you don't have the opportunity to like tinker and toil and like get frustrated about it. And that means there's like a lot of bad stuff out. Like that's the thing, like with Vine, like I didn't like Vine when it existed. To be honest, like it was just too much. I just didn't like it. Was I like that. But after the fact on YouTube, watching a compilation, it gets like you get to see the best of bits. But the best of bits wouldn't have happened if a person hadn't also done like 90 not great finds.
Well,
So I think that's like a good thing.
Well, speaking of compilations, for a while, Pluto TV was actually playing old episodes of After Hours on their platform.
Oh, that's cool. I wonder who got paid for that because it wasn't me.
Oh, ouch.
Oh, yeah, we're on Amazon too. Yeah,
of course.
It's
Yeah, I actually have a few friends of mine who are actually have some of the films that they've worked on Tubi and on I think the other one is oh gosh, what's the other streaming platform that's on? But yeah, so like people can go on Tubi and see his movie for free. It's really strange, and just the way streaming is nowadays. How have you like looked at maybe streaming as an alternative to also put content on? Have you looked at maybe that as a gateway to some other kind of audience as well?
Oh, of course. I mean, I feel like that's just one of the big players, and like I just got off of producing a show coming up for YouTube, and like it's a budget thing.
Good.
And it's to me, it's all kind of the same.
Like, can you kind of just share a little bit of what it's about, or is it, or is it still kind of in the works, or?
I don't really know. I mean, we wrapped, and I don't know exactly when it comes out, so I'm hesitant to say. It was a really fun project, having to do with the Olympics, which was very cool. And with some really great talent, and it was really fun. But so for me, it's like because the money is everywhere now, right? There's money in streaming. There's just budgets for things are pretty equal. It feels like the same thing. Like you're just like, yeah, if I'm doing it on Quibi, then I'm doing it on on network, or I'm doing it on YouTube. It at this point, it all feels. The quality of production is.
I think one of the big change, obviously, especially in entertainment today, is obviously with movie theaters being closed and the major studios not being able to make money on the big budget blockbuster movies, they are looking for stuff to insulate the loss of that revenue. And I think that especially with streaming and everything starting to really come into play, while I don't think movie theaters are going away. I don't think that major motion pictures are going to go away, but I think that investors are going to be like looking at, I don't exactly want to give $50 million to make a $200 million movie. I'd rather give the money to a lower budget project that will render me some more money as an investor than that. I think that's what's going to be a major player in the next 5 to 10 years. Not to say major films are gonna never be made. Obviously, you're still gonna have big blockbuster movies, but like, I think that, streaming and especially lower budget content is gonna be a really big player. And of course, obviously, you're looking to position yourself in that market. Um, what are the have you seen have you seen a bigger competition in that space in the last couple months or anything like that?
Well, it's just what I'm just realizing about production in and of itself is like it is all about the relationships you make with other people. There's
Yeah,
not really
networking.
competition in the way that like, if you're an engineer going up for a position at a company and you're literally against 6 other engineers, and it's they're looking at they're having an interview, they're looking at your resume, they're looking at your experience, and they're making those decisions based on that. So all of the jobs I've gotten have literally been like someone calling me up and being like, hey, are you available? Hey, are you interested?
Yep, I know that
and
feeling.
then you work on a new gig and you meet new people, and then they go like, hey, I can't take this gig, do you want to do it? And how much of it is based on like trust that you build with other people. And I detest like networking in the icky sense of like going into a situation solely to like gain something. But I found that just by like showing up and doing good work, people want to work with you. What a concept. And like it's like if there's a PA that I friggin' love that has that like, because the hope is that once you get up to a point in production that you've been a PA at some point, you've made yourself up, gone up through the chain. But if there's a PA that I go like, you are detail oriented, I don't have to tell you things 9 million times, you understand what we're doing, you get that even though you are a cog in the machine, you are an integral cog in the machine, I'm going to go like, I want that person on a PA for another,
Right.
As a PA on another gig, because I know I can trust them. I know, they're going to make my life easier, and therefore my life, I'm going to make somebody else's life easier. So when you talk about like competition like that, I can imagine it's more for people who are pitching shows and people who are writing shows and trying to get, pitches sold. But the thing is, it's just, there's so many places to put stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
There's so many, so many networks and so many streaming services and so many avenues that I feel like some of the barriers have been broken in terms of like the gatekeeping to, white, male, well-connected creators.
Exactly.
There's just literally more space, and people are more willing to kind of, like, I think of the Jon Stewart packet. I don't know if you guys heard of this, but for Jon Stewart's new show, his head writer is a woman named Chelsea Devantez, who is amazing. She's an amazing writer, and she's just like a really cool human. And she wrote on a pilot that he had done a while ago for another, talk show. And he got her packet blind submission, didn't know, she was not repped. She had comedy experience, but she wasn't connected. She literally was still working her day job, and she got this job writing on his show.
That's amazing.
And so when she got brought on as the head writer for his new show, she said, all we're doing is blind submission. We're not going through agents. They literally put a call out. They made it a six like 1-sentence jokes. They had, you didn't have to be repped, and it's all blind. And it's she said, because we want people to be able to do this packet when they're on their friggin' break from, working as a waitress.
Right.
We want people to be able to do this packet, and because they're funny, and to not be like gatekeeping of, just because you have reps doesn't mean that you're good.
I know, that's the thing about Hollywood, especially in the LA scene. I'm sure that there's a lot of people who they get the job because they got the representation, not necessarily because they got the talent. And and that's probably something that's a really a problem for a lot of people that don't really get a chance. And I think that something like that is amazing, that regular people are going to get a chance to. And I think, again, it goes right to what's going on now in the culture of creativity that's kind of building that in right now in the system.
And I don't really want
Yeah,
to
I
use the
mean-
word fresh blood, but it does bring a fresh perspective in.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, and I think what it also does is so much of like what we hear about Hollywood and the history of Hollywood, you know, there are a lot of like people's dreams coming true, but a lot of it is closed off, greed. I'm,
Yes. Oh,
yeah.
you know, I'm holding on to my opportunity. I'm not reaching out a hand. Like I need to look out for number one. And what I
Right.
feel like these this graciousness and generosity that's coming into production, into writing, into staffing, I think it will in the long run change the culture, right? Because
Yeah.
I have been so lucky to have people, you know, just suggest me for stuff. And like, I want to do that for other people, you know, and that sort of energy is very different. And I think will birth like a lot of new interesting media that's very different from anything like we've ever.
That comes through in your
seen.
performances too. I've always thought you were kind of, this great mix of a young Madeline Kahn or Gilda Radner in the way you are.
Oh, I love it.
The greats.
Gilda's my jam.
Oh, yeah.
Gilda is my jam.
Oh boy,
Will always
I know.
be my love.
Classics Saturday Night Live, you know,
Yeah.
with the original cast members. Great time. You know, just a lot of changes. What do you think? Like, what do you think the perception of what the future is going to be like? If you had to imagine 5 years from now, you know, the
I
stuff
can't even imagine 5 minutes from now.
I mean, I know. I honestly
I mean, if anything this year has taught me, it's that any illusion of control I thought I had over my life does not exist.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
an interesting aspect, how much it's just changed. I actually kind of have a different perspective, especially with the internet. You know how like Andy Warhol said, like, you know, everybody's famous for 15 minutes. I think it's changed to everybody's famous for 15 seconds. And that's about 5 or 6 seconds too long, mainly because of the way that, you know, our attention spans have changed. Because you can watch TV shows from the 60s and 70s and 80s, and they are just they're just differently produced than they were. You know, there's like a definite change in the way that you see movies and TV shows made today. But there is that callback to classic retro stuff that people love to have, you know, i.e. Stranger Things or, you know, that 70s show or something like that. People are trying to bring back that old classic stuff, like even with WandaVision as well.
I almost called it Wanda and Falcon, and I realized I was just mixing up the two shows.
They kind of blur together.
But what's very cool about like WandaVision, which I still haven't seen and need to see, is that it reminded me of like must-see TV.
Yes.
You know, in the 90s on NBC, you know, every week, like, sorry, my sister is FaceTiming me.
Oh, okay.
That's okay.
But it's one of those things where like people were after every episode, everybody lost their damn mind.
Oh,
you know?
yeah. I remember that.
This built up kind of just fervor that I feel like hasn't really happened since like primetime, you know, TV in the 90s.
Yeah. I was actually just recently looking at some old TV shows, and one of them was Third Rock from the Sun. I don't know if you guys watched that show back when it was on TV.
I did, yeah.
But that's a perfect example of just one of those crazy zany shows that now, with the technology of just being able to just binge watch it, you can watch 5 or 6 episodes in a run, and they have like 6 seasons of that thing. It's crazy how much more available it is. But it also combines the fact that you've got old media and new media kind of competing with each other. So
yeah, it's interesting. I think that with the streaming content, there's a bubble. I think that, you know, we're getting to a point where we're all going to have cable again. You know what I mean? I'm paying for 4 different streaming services.
It's very true.
Pretty
and then
much.
someone's going to come along and they're going to be like, here's a bundle of all the streaming services. And then it's like, oh, great, I'm paying for cable again. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's different for sure.
Yeah.
I worked for the cable company for 20 years, and that's exactly what it was. All the cable companies did was they bundled all your channels together and made sure that you didn't have snow on your TV. That's all they did. I think honestly, you're seeing like companies offering deals. Like I think it's like some companies are like offering, like T-Mobile's offering Netflix with your this or that or whatever, so you don't pay for it. You pay for it through your phone bill, or it's Verizon that does Disney Plus or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have Disney Plus. I think Disney Plus is through Verizon.
Mhm.
I have Hulu through Spotify, and I have Apple TV through Apple for free.
It's really crazy. You
Yeah,
know?
and it's like you think things like the Warner Brothers, like Warner Media's
HBO Max.
HBO Max, right? But then you're like, there's like not enough. It's like sometimes it's just that weighing that thing of like, what is it that I need to watch on that, streaming? So you're
Yeah.
trying to do that math because you're like, which is the one that's going to be the most. Like I have Netflix and I watch Criminal Minds over and over again.
Oh, God.
It's-
You watch the hell out of that.
Yep.
Yep, I've watched through the 12 seasons on Netflix probably 5 times.
Yeah.
And then I've watched the 13th, 14th, and 15th seasons, I think twice at this point. It's like my comfort show.
Yeah.
But it's like I'm paying $8 or $9 a month to
Yes.
watch
It's very
Criminal
true.
Minds over and over again.
Yeah, I have all the DVDs actually. That's what I usually do. Is I actually am a physical media kind of guy, and I mean
Oh,
before
I just found I've gotten too lazy. I just, it's just so easy to stream. It's like,
I'll do that. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
it.
it's like also it's like, can I put it in the DVD?
It's too hard to
Yeah.
put the DVD in.
I don't really want to walk all the way over
I
and switch the
can't.
cables and exactly.
I can't open the case.
I've gotten that lazy. Oh,
Yeah, I think about that with what movie was it? It was like, oh, I own Drop Dead Gorgeous, but I'd rather watch it on Hulu when it was on Hulu. It's like I can look at that DVD on my shelf, but I'd prefer to I'd prefer to just click it on a streaming service.
Mm.
all right. Well, if people want to check out your artwork or any of the stuff you've been working on or photography, where can they find you?
I'm on Instagram at Katie Willert Art. That's KatieWillertArt.
Oh, excellent. Are you also on like Facebook or Twitter as well, also known as that Dumpster Fire?
Oh yeah, on Twitter. I'm on Twitter at that handle as well, and my personal Twitter is KA Willert.
Okay, great. So,
Yeah.
Katie, thank you for
Nice.
stopping by and chatting with us. It was good to finally meet
Thank
you.
you. I know. Thanks for
We'll have to
having
do
me.
this
It is
again.
Oh,
funny.
absolutely.
I would love to, for
Oh,
sure.
great.
And next time I won't back it up against my FaceTiming with my my child brother and sister.
Family's
That's okay.
important.
Family happens.
Yeah, family's important.
Yep.
Yeah. Sweet. Well, thanks. Thank you so much, guys.
Oh, you're very
Thank you.
welcome.
Cool. Well, have a good night.
You as
Yep.
well.
See you later.
Bye, guys. Thank you. I
Bye-bye.
appreciate it.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.
And we're alone.
Alone again.
Alone. So, do you have any interest in just chatting about the Chatty McChatmans of just talking about stuff that's going on the crazy pop culture end? Anything going on? Like, have you been watching like anything like Marvel related or anything like?
Not really. I mean, Sid's been watching Falcon and Winter Soldier, but
I have been
haven't
watching.
really- I haven't
I've
really been
watched that
keeping up
too.
with it though. I just, it's like most of the stuff I've been watching has been kind of old.
Have you watched? Okay, let's talk. Since we talked a little bit about streaming shows,
All right,
let's talk about streaming shows that we've been binging lately.
Oh God, I can't really. The only one I've really been binging lately is The Muppet Show. I've been watching old episodes of The Muppet Show. That's really been the only thing that I've been watching like steadily.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's like tonight we were watching old episodes of the British Whose Line Is It Anyways?
Now, myself personally, I've actually gotten a little bit different. I actually been binging stuff on Tubi, and one of the things I like about Tubi is they have the really unusual stuff. And I've been watching this show called Law and Order UK.
Oh, really? Oh, I think I've heard about this because I believe this is the one they had some of the actors from the revived version of Doctor Who on.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I think that's really interesting about that show is that they take the formula from the Law and Order shows that are based in New York, and they put it in London.
Yes.
I mean, they even have it right down to the dun dun.
Really?
Like that sound effect.
I've heard. I've never seen it, but I've heard of that one.
It's really, really interesting. It's like it's a very interesting show, and you don't necessarily get a chance to see stuff like that, on regular TV. And that's one of the reasons why I like streaming is that you get to see stuff. And not only that, but they also have other shows. Like there's another show that I like that's off from Australia. It's called Sea Patrol, and it's about a naval disorder. It's really interesting. It's like it's really strange.
Yeah.
But you get to watch these really crazy shows.
Sea Patrol in color, a Quinn Martin production.
We're going to get the guys that are illegally fishing off their reef there. It's like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And it's like you get to see TV shows from around the world.
I know. Stuff that we hadn't really stuff, a lot of the things we just, it's like with technology, and I was just thinking about that with technology, and at least the last 20 years, there's stuff that, stuff I really kind of heard of, from time to time, but never really got to see because, it was stuff that was over the UK that didn't necessarily come over here. Stuff like, say, Peter Sellers and the Goon Show, which was a radio show from the UK in the 1950s, and I'd heard of it through reading books on Monty Python being one of the influences, but I didn't really get a chance to really get in the episodes or listen to any of the episodes until I went over to Liverpool and in London and went to one of the stores and picked it up, and that was the only way. This was like really before I was able to figure out stuff like Amazon. It was 2000, so it was like stuff like Amazon.com and eBay were around, but they weren't really being as used. And now you can go on YouTube or you can go on the internet. You can order, it's like you can either stream stuff, you can Audible. It's like, stuff is just so easily got. Whereas in the day, with like old Doctor Who episodes, you go down to Suncoast Video and or Media Play and pick up the old episodes on VHS. Kids.
Suncoast Videos.
Yep.
Oh, I remember that place.
And so that was like, those were the ways, if you wanted to get, it was like PBS or stuff like that. But I mean, like a lot of the obscure stuff, didn't always make its way over here.
No,
so
it didn't.
It wasn't like till maybe like after the year 2000, I was able to finally get to hear the stuff and just hear how hysterical it was. So.
Oh God, yeah. And like, it's just that they have different. There's so much content that because these streaming services are so desperate for content, they'll put everything on, and it's all ad supported. That's one of the things that I've always found really impressive. Shows like Columbo. You can watch all 7 or 8 seasons of Columbo from the 1970s.
Well, actually, it's funny. There was another thing talking with a British friend. They, it's like I mentioned Gilligan's Island, and he wasn't immediately familiar with that one. And then I'm thinking, it's like, well, that makes sense because there were a lot of shows over there that I may not necessarily know about that, were big, big shows they had growing up. Like one of them, he told me about, there was a miniseries called, I think it was called Box of Delights, which was like this based on these children's books, which had Second Doctor actor Patrick Troughton as an old Punch and Judy man. And he'd be, he was like this guy who would go around and do the old Punch and Judy shows, but it was like one of these like fantasy shows that was done with like the old BBC style, and I'd never heard about it, but I guess it was like Christmas viewing over there. Whereas of course, I mentioned Gilligan's Island, and he wasn't familiar with that. And it's like, well, it makes sense. I can't imagine the humor really translating well over in the UK to the American humor translating over there, and most of Gilligan's Island was hit or miss anyway.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the cultural differences in the humor, you can definitely tell.
exactly.
You got to kind of like be prepared for that kind of change. I mean, I remember there was watching a documentary about they were taking Everybody Loves Raymond and they were transitioning. They were trying to translate it for a Russian
I think
audience.
I remember because I think what's his name? Phil Rosenthal, who created it, mentioned. I think he mentioned it in either an interview or the Netflix show he was doing about it, his Netflix travel log.
I watched the documentary about that, and of course, when you're dealing with Russian humor, they don't do sarcasm. Okay,
no,
so sarcasm
they don't, really.
Doesn't work for a Russian audience, but like he had such a hard time dealing with these Russians who just did not understand American humor. They're like, why is that funny?
Well,
his kid just basically kicked him in the balls accidentally. Why is that funny? They wouldn't get it.
Right.
Because I mean that's the big thing is just translating it. And it's not just about the language; it's also about how to transition that kind of humor here.
Well, it's amazing the things that are were sort of things that we remember as kids that are actually bigger over in other places. The thing I was just thinking about when you mentioned transitioning was there was that car ad that was taken from the old Dungeons and Dragons cartoon.
Oh God, yes.
And it's a car ad that is, if people haven't seen it, if you haven't seen the ad online, it's like a cinema, theatrical feel to it.
It's as close to Dungeon. Like here's the thing. I mean, obviously, if our audience is listening, if they aren't familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, the TV show, the cartoon that was on for like one season.
But apparently, I think it was on. Maybe it was on like for 27 episodes, but it stretched out for like a couple of years. But it's one of these things. I guess it's big down in Brazil.
Apparently,
yeah.
And of course,
and that's amazing.
And of course, like they do this car ad, and they have actors dressed up as the actual characters,
and they look like them.
And it looks like a real, like legit, like if you were going to do a realistic, like.
The only thing it was missing was like Peter Cullen's voice as Avenger.
Oh my God, that would have been awesome.
I know. But I mean, you looked at the commercial and just like the amount of detail in it, just like, and it's them, because with the original series that they never really found that it never really had them go home or anything. Even though I guess the original writer wrote an episode, which I don't know if they finally ended up going.
Did that?
Yeah, they actually did. So in the commercial, you actually had them making their way back to the amusement park, and you're like, oh, they finally made it. Oh shit, he's here too. You knew they were going to throw that in. So
well, I mean, obviously, I think that we live in a day and age where people can create their own stuff, and they can take what hasn't been created. I mean, like fan films and fan fiction being the way that it is. I'm sure that there was a guy that wrote a script, which is a sequel to Buckaroo Banzai. Because remember, at the end of Buckaroo Banzai, it was supposed to be like,
him versus the
World Crime League.
That's it. And that was it.
Now we live in a day and age where somebody like I'm sure there's probably somebody who's like, I remember there was a guy that actually in New England who they took like the script that they were going to do for the sequel after Batman and Robin. And they made a version of the script that was supposed to be the next movie after Joel Schumacher. And it was obviously like one of those backyard, everybody's just going to buy Halloween costume kind of productions.
Yeah.
And they did that. It's on YouTube somewhere.
Of course,
But basically they just took the script and they said, okay, we're just going to make the movie. And that's what they did. I
feel like this is a discussion for a whole other podcast because there's so many other fan productions. Like there's one I'm friends with on Facebook, this guy Rupert Booth and Paul Ferry, who back in the 90s made a series of Doctor Who episode, fan Doctor Who episodes, and Rupert Booth starred as like another version of alternate version of the Eighth Doctor, and they were really well done. I guess they don't really know, people in the cast don't really want them shown anymore. But I remember when I saw them, the writing was great and the acting was it was on par with like, Doctor Who that was being produced at the time, but it was, it was a really good TARDIS interior. But I feel like, yeah, this is like a whole nother podcast,
Yes, it is.
discussion. It's just fan films. And I mean, we've all tried to make them ourselves, but yeah.
We've been part of them. We've done.
Oh,
fan
absolutely.
films.
Absolutely. I'd like to thank our guest, Katie Willert, for stopping by and chatting tonight. On behalf of Andrew, thank you for listening to The Mental Suppository. Until next week, this is Brett Herholtz saying,
I knew I'd disturb you.
The Mental Suppository has been produced by Bret Herholtz and Jamie Billings and distributed by M the Media Project. Theme music generously donated by Mr. B, the Gentleman Rhymer. Visit his webpage at gentlemanrhymer.com. We would love to hear from our fans. Email us at mentalsuppository@gmail.com.